Welcome, Jeff. You're live.
I'm excited to get to part 2 of Crowded Learning's series of webinars that we're doing as Tech and Tells. Just as a very quick background, Crowded Learning, we are an organization. We're based in Chicago, Illinois, and our focus is finding and aligning free, high-quality, open education resources that can be used within adult education. And we've been doing that in a number of ways. We started off with just the process of simply asking educators, what resources are you using, asking adult educators, and we've compiled those things on our website. So this week, we're going to focus a little bit more granularly on, okay, if you have a resource like Khan Academy, or if you have a resource like CK12, two really high quality open education resources that have lots of activities and lessons and practice sets related to math in those cases. How do you take those and determine how to use them with your students, specifically related to the skills that students need to learn? And so we're going to do it in the process that's followed here. So first and foremost, as an organization that's focused on providing access to and alignments to these free resources, it's part of our responsibility to also let folks understand what are the can-dos and the cannot-dos when we're talking about using some of these resources. So the first thing we're going to talk about is differentiating between open and free resources. Then we're going to look at the resources that currently we have alignments for and just understand what those standards alignments mean and how you can use them to find specific content. Then we're going to look at some of those resources that is sort of just brushing through the different kinds of resources that are available and how you might use them. Then we're going to look at tools for actually sharing those resources with your students. So it may be that you just want your students using Khan Academy, and so you create a login for them, and then they know what lessons to go to because you have alignments to inform what you assign. It may be that you want to actually pull from different resources and provide them to students. So we're going to look at different creative ways that you can do that using things like Google Classroom or Remind, and a number of the tools that we're going to talk about. I'm pretty certain there's probably archived Tech and Tell recorded webinars on some of those tools, so where you could learn more about those specific tools and how to use them with your students. And then time permitting, which means that we need to move relatively quickly. However, we could certainly do some of this after, and it'll be really fun to share with you the results of what you do. The super fun bonus round is looking at one particular tool that I'm more and more interested in using and figuring out how to use. It's called Glide. It is a no-code app. And it was actually, I was introduced to it by Dr. Glenda Rose at the distance learning meeting that was in the spring in Texas. She actually did the entire program for that conference, that symposium, using this app, which literally you can create an app using a Google Sheets spreadsheet. So we're going to do a fun little activity on that. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in. And first question, if you could use the chat. This is to sort of see where we are at in terms of what does it mean when we say a resource is an open educational resource?
So Elizabeth Moya says the content is allowed to be used for instructional purposes. Claire says, welcome Claire, by the way, is a free resource. So Courtney is definitely familiar with OER, and she's got some of the lingo down. Print, revise, duplicate, distribute. And then Jorge says everyone can use it.
All of these are correct. So what we're going to look at now is differentiating between open and free resources. And actually at that conference that I mentioned in the spring, Ashley Winkle and I did a full-blown, like literally you could spend an hour and a half and more on understanding the ins and outs of open education resources. But for our purposes, we're going to do a quick walkthrough. And what that is Creative Commons is a licensing agency that is basically, it's out there for the sole purpose of creating licenses that indicate what you can or cannot do with a resource, in particular helping us understand if a resource is open or not. And so when we talk about open, as was someone already said in here, free is not the same thing as open. So Crowded Learning, we do alignments for lots of different resources. Some of them are free, many of them are open. But when we're talking about open, as defined by Creative Commons and their licenses, open refers to what are called the 5 R's. And the first is retain. So this means that you could actually take a resource and you can download a version of it for yourself. You could download it on a server, you could download it onto your computer, you could actually print it out, you can actually have a copy. It's not just going to like a login site where the only way that you have access to it is through that particular site. The second thing is that you have the ability to reuse it, meaning that you can take that and you can then reuse it with your students. Again, they don't have to necessarily access it specifically through the site where it came from. Revise is the third R, and this means that you actually have the ability to take content and make revisions to it. So, for example, it might be a text passage that is really related to a topic you teach, but you want to revise it in some way. Maybe you want to add more vocabulary words in there, or you might want to cut a couple paragraphs that aren't really related to what you are teaching. Revising allows you the ability to do that. Remixing is the fourth R, and what that means is, say there is a text passage that you like, and then you want to add comprehension questions that go with that text passage, or you want to combine that with another text passage that's related, so that students are looking at two different text passages on the same topic and doing some comparisons of the two. You're adding content to another piece of work and remixing it, so that's what that refers to. And then the fifth R is redistribute. And what redistribute refers to is you could do any of these things above, and then you are given the allowance to actually take that resource and to share it out as well to other people. It could be through a website, or it could even, like, photocopying is a form, and passing those out is a form of redistribution. So these are kind of what are called the 5 R's, and they're designated on resources using the following licenses by Creative Commons. So if a work it says CC BY, which would be attribution, that just means you just need to say, this is the source of this content. I did not create this content, but I am using this content. No derivative works means, which would be ND, that means that your version must equal mine. You are not allowed to make changes. So if you just think back to the 5 R's I talked about, if you can't make changes, that means that if it's no derivative, that means you can't revise it and you cannot remix it. So by definition, if something has this license attached to it, that means that it is not open because you don't have the ability to do 2 of the 5 R's. You can't remix it and you can't revise it. Share alike simply means that if I allow you to change it, you must repeat my license. So if I allow you to change it, so say I license it as CC BY here, and I allow you to change it, but I also say share alike, you can't then take it and then change the license and say it's going to be no derivative works from my version. You're not allowed to do that because the original content that you're using is mine, and I am saying you need to repeat the same license. And then finally, the last one is non-commercial. This means you are allowed to use it, but you cannot make money. So in reality, if something is not listed as non-commercial and it's openly licensed, say it was a text passage, and I wanted to create a resource around that text passage and add to it and then sell it on, say, Teachers Pay Teachers, if it's not licensed as non-commercial, I technically have the ability to do that because the rights holder of the content has given me permission by way of not licensing it as non-commercial. And so when you're looking at openly licensed resources or Creative Commons licensed resources, these are the different variations of licenses you might see. So it's any combination of those 4 license types that I just walked through. And when we're looking at what openness means, there's sort of varying degrees of open. So if something at the bottom here you see is copyrighted, that means it's obviously not open. This could be like publisher materials, right? So they have a copyright page. It is not Creative Commons licensed, so you have limited ability to what you do, and it will state that on the copyright page. And this goes from really least freedom to most freedom, where the most free resource would be this symbol, which is actually a public domain document or resource, meaning anyone in the public can use it however they want. Basically, this top portion is what would be referred to as open education resources. Because they check off the 5 R's, you can remix, you can reuse, you can revise, you can redistribute, and you can retain. So all of these licenses up top fit those 5 R's, meaning they're openly licensed. These bottom 2 are not OER. So there will be resources that are free and have these licenses, but technically you have limitations on what you can do with them. And you'll notice the distinguishing feature of these 2 down at the bottom and the copyright in terms of what makes it not OER is the fact that it has this do not distribute, or excuse me, no derivative works symbol here. And the importance of this is simply, as I said, crowded learning, we are providing you with lots of different resources and saying, look, this aligns the skills you need to teach. And that's awesome that you have access to it. We just want to make sure that you're being responsible when you take those and do whatever various things you might do with them, that you understand the restrictions that exist for that resource. So here are some quick examples. TV411 is a really good site. So this is basically how will I know if something is licensed as open or not. So I'm going to hop quickly to TV411, which is lots of videos and activities that are related to all of these different subjects up here. And if I scroll down to the bottom, they're kind of nice and easy because right on their homepage, you see that this is the license, that it is a non-commercial attribute share-alike license, which means you have to attribute them if you were to use one of these things. You cannot use it commercially, and you need to repeat the same exact license when you do so. So the question is, so the attributions are stackable is one question. They are in this, you would not have more than one license for a resource. You sort of have to pick a specific license is one of the questions that's in here. But in some cases, a website will have this symbol right on the main page, and it will say, unless otherwise noticed, indicated, all of these resources are licensed as such. PhET is another great resource that is also openly licensed. So these are all really great free simulations in math and science, and I'm going to go straight to one of them. And it's a little more hidden. It's not listed on the front page anywhere, but they do have this licensing link here. And you'll see all simulations are made by PhET and are open under the Creative Commons Attribution License CC BY. So again, this is something where if I wanted to create a web page that was access only and you had to pay to get to it, and I used their simulations, I technically would be able to do so because they've licensed it as CC BY. I would be required, however, to say that this simulation was developed by PhET, and I would have to give the proper attribution to them by saying that. So that's an example of something that has a pretty open license. It's just CC BY. It's about as open as you can be for a license other than being a public domain resource. Quill is another free resource and one for which we provide alignments for. But when I go to Quill, you're not going to see anything on the main page related to Creative Commons licensing. It's quite a long page. But for all sites, or almost all sites, you're going to see either terms of use or privacy, and that's where you're going to find information related to what you're allowed to do or not to do with a resource. So in this case, this is one that you are absolutely able to use freely. I know people probably don't necessarily read through all of these. You certainly can use these with students. It's freely available. That's what it's designed to do. But you couldn't take, say, a Quill activity and then make a worksheet out of it and and create that for your students. That's really not something you're allowed to do. Whereas Khan Academy, which does have openly licensed content, you could actually take a practice set from Khan Academy, and if, say, your students didn't have online access or you wanted to create a worksheet using those practice items, you technically have the ability to do so because of the way it's licensed. So you have the ability to sort of remix and reuse it and redistribute it in a print sort of format as opposed to the online format. So that's just sort of the cautionary tale. So you'll see Quill is a copyrighted resource, but it's free and it's really high quality, and we're going to see that in a second. So I want you to do a little quick concept check. So in your, open up a new tab. If you want to go to one of these two sites, Math Antics has really great videos that cover a whole bunch of math topics, but a lot of teachers really like it and say their students like it. And CK12 is a great resource that has lots of texts and interactivities and practice sets and videos around math and science topics and others. So I want you to go and take a look at these sites and see if you can determine if these are if either of these sites is just a free site or if it's Creative Commons licensed, and if it's Creative Commons licensed, what type of license does it have? And if you Google, you should be able to get directly to the site K12.
How closely is the legal field looking at this? So if I go to all my trouble to do all of this, is the support there? So if, for instance, with FET, and someone creates a website that they have to pay for, someone has to pay for to access, but they have FET on their website, I'm curious as to what FET can do to say, no, I meant this to be open. You can't block people. You know what I'm saying? It's interesting to me.
Well, so that's the thing is you as the license holder, you have whatever you want to be the case in terms of how you license it. So for example, if FET, well, let's get to the answers here. So Math Antics is copyrighted. CK12 is not. It is an open resource, and so this means that if I were to use CK12, if I were to take any version of a text and download it and sort of print it out, that's cool. I can do that because there's limited restrictions here. I just have to make sure that I'm saying this content is from CK12, and I can't go ahead and sell that. I could contact CK12, and I could say, hey, I'm interested in using your content for something, and we could come to an agreement with CK12 that says, oh, we want to have some sort of, licensed version where people are paying to access it. And that's completely what I'm saying when I say non-commercial is that you cannot use this commercially unless you sort of run it by us first. So for example, Reading Skills for Today's Adults, we worked with them to make sure that they just didn't update their site, and rather than not saying anything about it, we said it would be a great idea if you could give it a Creative Commons license, because it just tells everybody what they can or cannot do with your resource. And so it is non-commercial. So they have a non-commercial share-alike attribution. So it's by, SA, and C are the three things. So what that tells people is, and we're going to talk about, I'm going to do a crowdsourcing activity using Reading Skills for Today's Adults. Those things are going to be freely accessible. They've worked with a software developer that does have a paid version of Reading Skills for Today's Adults. They have the right to create a commercial version of their content in whatever way they want. No one can do that unless they sort of come to an agreement with Reading Skills for Today's Adults, which is Southwest Minnesota Adult Basic Education. So it really depends on how open you want to make your content. And if you find that people are doing something with it and realize, ooh, that's not what I meant, you have every right to develop a new license and assign a new license to it. But that's on you to sort of understand what these licenses mean and then make sure that you're assigning the one that you're most comfortable with. And again, this is really just to make sure, I'm guessing folks aren't taking things and going, ooh, I'm going to create a side business taking Khan Academy videos and doing something, but it's more for some of these uses that we think, oh, I'm a teacher, I'm allowed to do this. We just want to make sure that it's clear that there's certain things that you are allowed and are not allowed to do, particularly as we get more web-based, because it's so easy to download something and it's so easy to share a link or add a link to your web page. And we just want to make sure that folks understand those restrictions. All right. So last week we got into the technology that Crowded Learning is looking to build, and this is something that right now on our site we have alignments to, but what we're really looking to build is a platform that allows some automation for folks to take resources that they are interested in using and picking a specific skill or topic they teach and finding the resources that they use. So we have content alignments for like almost 300 publisher print books, as well as a number of free and open online sources. And our goal is to create a tool that allows you to create learning plans, maybe something that looks like this. We're going to be testing different things. We're actually working with students at Brigham Young University to just understand sort of the usability of what we're starting to build. But where you can pick a topic like understanding the properties of two-dimensional figures and see from the publisher resources that you might have access to what lessons align to it, as well as from these free and open education resources, what lessons, activities, simulations, and whatnot align to it, and then create sort of outputs that fit however you want to use those things. Maybe you want to assign an HTML page that the students have access to that has all of these things. Maybe you want to download a spreadsheet and do your own manipulation so that you sort of have your own sort of version of what resources align as you're developing curriculum. And so we're doing that in a way. These are real designs, but this site is not live. We're in the process of building it, where you can go through and search by subject and level and publisher or source, if it's a publisher resource, as well as the licensing type, to find resources that are in our database for which we have standards alignments. And this is kind of like Spotify, where you basically just click on the plus, and it's going to add it to your resources, meaning that if there is a lesson, or excuse me, a skill that you want to teach, and there is some lesson or activity from that particular resource that aligns to that skill, you're going to see that and know what skills are actually existing and what lessons and activities do. And then this is where you actually go find the skill. So this will allow you to search by subject, by level, and by domain, and find specific lessons or find specific skills that you want to teach, and actually see the number of resources from your library of resources that you've set aside and said, hey, I use this. You'll see how many lessons or activities actually align to that particular skill, and then you'll also see the number of lessons and activities within the entire skill blocks library that align to that particular skill. And where we're trying to get is where you have the ability to customize that. So for a particular skill, you can hide or unhide things. You can make things required or optional, meaning these are the things that you have to do, and then these are things that just exist that if you want to use them, if you need additional help or you need remediation, these are available as well. But where you can actually see all of the resources in one place from various different sources that align to that particular skill. And to have the ability to just have that, and so say you want to copy this and paste it into Google Classroom or paste it into a Remind, you'd have the ability to do so. Our ultimate goal is to get this to a place where there are learning plans that are student-facing that you can create, where if it's a book resource, it's not that they're going to be able to see the book online, but at least they'll know for this skill, this is a lesson in the book that you have access to that covers this particular skill. And then also here is an open resource, or in this case a free resource that's not open. Mathematics is not open, where this link will take you to a video that helps you with this particular skill. So trying to increase these options for learners. These are the resources that we currently have alignments for. Now, these aren't in that skill blocks database right now. These are all separate spreadsheets, and we're going to look at each of them in a second. But we have these two reading resources, Common Lit and ReadWorks. We have 4 math resources. We're about to add a 5th next week, but Khan Academy, CK12, PhET Simulation, and Common Core Sheets. The 5th one that we're going to be adding next week is called School Yourself, which is a super awesome site that has very thorough lessons that are interactive. and then Quill is the one that we have for grammar. And I saw in the chat earlier someone says that they use Quill with their students already, so that's awesome. So why are we doing this? And say, why are publishers working with us on this? Well, they sort of realize their limitations. A book can only be so big, and this is a brand new resource. This is from one of the publishers on a particular skill that is a TABE skill, and here's the standard from the College and Career Readiness Standards on it, looking at the properties of two-dimensional figures. So this is a 2-page lesson. Here are all these definitions of lines, line segments, raised, angles, right, acute, obtuse, perpendicular lines, parallel lines. And then here are the 8 activities or 8 practice exercises that students have to do. This is the one lesson in this book that aligns to this standard. This does align to that standard very well, but it certainly doesn't cover it. They're not drawing any of these things in these 8 activities, right? These are all multiple choice questions. So immediately it's path to standard is not covered. Does this align to the standard? Yes. Does it cover the standard? No. When we go into the crowded learning alignments and look at the various resources that align to that, you'll see we have all of these different resources that align, including within Khan Academy, a couple things that deal with actually drawing those figures and drawing those angles, and then other things that provide additional remediation. So it's looking at the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all resource, and in many cases, there's no single resource that actually really provides full coverage. And so we're looking to provide that. The other sort of goal is, again, with that student-facing version that we want to get to, is helping students think about how they are as learners. So providing more options so that they see that for any particular skill, there's multiple options, and starting to ask them questions about, does this resource work for you or not, and why, so that they think about their own learning. Because once they're outside of our hands, like we on a daily basis are encountered with things where we need to learn something or find information out, it really helps when you know what resources work for you for finding good answers, and also what resources work for you in terms of like something that you can actually sit and learn from. So, this is something on ratios. This is a Khan Academy video. Every Khan Academy video is very much structured the same. It is very routine-based, and it's all Khan going through and walking through the procedure of a problem. But at the same time, there's a really cool set of videos called Math Snacks, and this one's called Bad Date. And Bad Date is a video where the girl on the left goes on a series of bad dates because the ratio of the number of words that she says to the number of words that her date says is not equal. So this guy talks too much, the next guy talks too few, or too little, so she talks to a 6-to-1 ratio of him, and then finally she meets somebody that they speak at a 1-to-1 ratio. So it's just a far more entertaining and engaging way of learning the same concepts of ratios that's very memorable. Here's something from CK12 that is the simulation that allows the student to play around and sort of see in a miles per gallon, obviously a relevant concept to adults, this concept of ratio using that. And then here's something from a site called Math is Fun, which for some students might be a complete oxymoron, but these are nice sort of text-based with some interactive concepts that sort of students are walked through. In this case, there's the one on ratio. So, there's a range of different options for this one single skill, and we want to provide learners with those options. So,
talking about skill blocks, just to make sure, it sounds like it's a library and people can create their own personal skill block and add things so that they can go and add things to their library, right?
That's what we are working towards. So that's the ultimate goal.
Okay, because I'm thinking, because I'm already thinking, instead of having, if you have like a whole, like a center that has more than one teacher, I'm thinking about Ashley and her team that she works with at Literacy Council Tyler. Could they all have access to the same skill block so that they could all log on instead of having all these different teachers with all these different personal skill blocks? Could they all have access to the same one?
That is absolutely sort of where we want to get, is where it's not, hey, we want people to share, we want people to sort of collaborate. And so, yeah, you may be the superstar tech teacher at your school, and that's awesome. We don't necessarily think that every teacher is going to be doing that, but yes, with this notion of being able to share things, what we want is, hey, if this center has all of the same, we all have access to the same resources, we either work collaboratively to build out the library, or, one teacher that really is just into it does it. But then, yes, they can share that out, and so that everyone has access to that listing of resources that are available for the various skills. So understanding how that works, in terms of the use cases is what we're actually working on right now. That's the project that I was talking about that we're working on with some instructional design students at Brigham Young. So Crowded Learning's website is crowdedlearning.org. And if I go to the Skill Blocks tab, now Skill Blocks is going to be a platform, like it's going to be its own separate URL. But right now we have the alignments that will actually end up in Skill Blocks, and teachers are really using these pretty extensively already. So if I go to any of these 3 subject areas, I will see these are the resources that we're going to be putting into Skill Blocks, at least right now. For some of them, you're going to see these view alignments documents. So in math, it's CK12, Khan Academy, and Common Core Sheets.
Can you share where people would go to give you to volunteer, or to give you an idea of a resource that you can eventually go add to Skill Block? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So what I do want to share there right now is how you actually access these alignments. So you do not need Google Drive in order to access the alignments, but they all are in Google Drive. So I actually moved over to Safari because my Drive account is not linked there. And I want you to see what someone might see who doesn't have Google Drive. So when I go here, it's going to show me the spreadsheet. And you're going to see that it's a view-only mode, and it's still loading, so it's going to take a second. But so this is the alignment. It's aligned by the standard, the CCRS level and TABE level. We're going to talk about that in a second. You'll see we indicate how it's licensed, and then the levels. And so all of these are links. In this case, it's Khan Academy, to the practice sets. So if I click on any one of these and then click on this, it's going to launch me into Khan Academy. So you may obviously hopefully want to review the resource before sharing it with students, and so this allows you to do that. However, within this document, I can't type in this because I don't have access to it, which is the same as everybody. Even if you have a Drive account, you don't have the ability to alter what you're looking at. But if you want to get a version of your own so that you can do whatever you want with it, you have 2 options. So if you have a Drive account, you can click on Make a Copy. Now, again, I'm in Safari. My Drive account is not linked, so this is grayed out. But if you were to open this up in Chrome or whatever you have, and you have a Drive account, this would be live. So you can make a copy of the spreadsheet that is added to your own Drive. Then you have the ability to do whatever you want with it. But even if you don't have Drive, you have the ability to download it in all of these different formats. If you download it as Excel, it retains all of the links. If you download it as a PDF, it retains all of the links as well. So it would be a PDF document where all of these hyperlinks work. And so that's how you actually get to these and access them. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here and just show you just a quick overview of how these are aligned, because this is important, and Anne-Marie's going to step in a second just to sort of make some connections for you. So, because, we're not Texas state specific, we're national, and we're just trying to figure out how do people want to use these first. We've done it to the standards, the college and career readiness standards, and to the TABE test, which is, pretty widely used nationally. We know CASAS has a test as well. Getting and understanding what their standards alignment is a little bit trickier. So, TABE is very literal in terms of how they've aligned their tests to the standards. So the way this is organized is an increasing level of difficulty. So levels A, B, C, D, E, TABE level L, E, M, D, A. And then it's by level and then by domain within the topic. And then what you see here is how they align specifically to the standards and to TABE. So this is a specific college and career readiness standard and then the emphasis on TABE. Now, I know you in Texas have the Texas Standards 2.0. So what you will need to do is sort of make some sort of judgment calls and understanding about the sub areas and the domains within the standards, and understanding your students' levels in terms of, getting to content that relates. So, Anne-Marie, I don't know if you want to step in real quick on that.
Okay, so all I want to say here, just very quickly, is that, let's say, for example, because I think a lot of us are familiar with Common Lit and ReadWorks. If you are familiar with Standards 2.0, which I know many of you on the call are, it is very easy to crosswalk if you are looking at Common Lit and it shows, because did you align that, Jeff, to the college and career, but you also did it to the Common Core, right? Something like Common Lit, or is it just to the college and career readiness standards?
Well, it's just the CCRS, which are a subset of the Common Core. So it's the domain.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
They share the same domains, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, you'll see that if, for instance, it's understanding informational text, or facts and opinions, understanding the difference between facts and opinions in an informational text, you'll be able to very quickly, once you become familiar with the standards, to go to the standards in section 1 and the sub-areas 2 for reading, and you'll be able to look at your sub-areas and then your sub-area standards and see what you can use. Yes, is it not ideal, but you'll see a lot of similarity. And then go to skill blocks, exactly. So that's what Jeff is saying. How many of you are using and are familiar with Standards 2.0 and can kind of see the crosswalk of where to go? So for English language arts, I think you'll be able to know exactly where to go. Mathematics, again, that's sub-area 2. That's content area 2 with several different sub-areas, one of which is algebra, geometry, and data analysis. So you can see right away where you can go to those. Okay, so Jeff, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. So topically, there'll be the need to sort of make some connections, and hopefully, I'm guessing a lot of teachers are going to have their own sort of systems for sort of, making those connections and keeping track of those. Down the road, we'd love to be able to add in different filters within the platform so that you could search the resources by Standards 2.0 or state-specific standards, but we're just trying to get the sort of base model up and running and working as we, see teachers wanting to use it first. So in terms of just what we have alignments for, I'm going to do a very quick walkthrough of these. Many of these are probably resources that you've seen. Maybe they're not, but if you haven't, again, on the Crowded Learning site and under skill blocks, you'll see the alignments and you'll be able to click out to these resources and see them. So Khan Academy, again, everyone's pretty familiar with that. You see the license in the bottom. It is open, but it's non-commercial, share alike. And so what we have alignments for within Khan Academy are actually specifically the practice sets, because that's the only thing that they've provided their alignments to. They haven't done it to the videos. They've only done it for their practice sets. And so we sort of worked with that. And that's actually an important thing to note. Right now, all of our resources for which we have alignments, we are taking it at face value based on whoever the publisher or the creator of the content is. We're using comprehensive libraries like Khan Academy and others as our sort of starting point. So when you see the alignments, that is the alignment as identified by whoever created the content. Down the road, where we really want to get to is, again, this notion of crowdsourcing, where if you have a cool video for this particular topic that you use, that you have the ability to submit it, and then we do some level of review to make sure it aligns, and then to be able to add some of those resources in. But right now, we're starting just with sort of tried and true known resources, Khan Academy being one of them. And again, they've created alignments for their practice sets. So on the Khan Academy alignment document, you'll see there's like there's over 2,000 practice sets in there that cover sort of all levels and align to standards. And you'll see that what it links you to is the actual practice set. So you'll see this is what the practice set looks like. And it's a series of problems that relate to that topic. So one of the notions that we think is interesting is, okay, if a student needs to work on something, or if it's a topic, you can start with actually a set of practice items to see, can you do this particular problem? And what's nice about every single Khan Academy practice set is they have this little link that you see called Stuck, and it asks if you want to watch a video or use a hint. And so when you click on that, this opens up below, and you can see the related video for that concept, as well as to get an additional hint. And so you could click on that video and then actually see a video where the concept is instructed and walked through. So that's what we have with Khan Academy. CK12, I think this was a resource we did talk about last week, but I love CK12 because it kind of does what crowded learning is looking to do with its own resources, in that for all of these different topical sets, there are readings, there are interactives, there are videos, there are practice sets, there are real-world activities, and sometimes there are study guides as well that are sort of downloadable. In this case, this is actually looking at unit rates, and you'll see the real-world activity is an article about discount clubs. So a great sort of real-world concept that is very relatable for adults, things like Sam's or BJ's, wholesale clubs or Costco, where obviously with the volume, you get it's a discounted unit rate, and that's why these things are so popular. And so it provides all of these for these various topics. Now, right now, we only have alignments for grades 6 through 8. I think they finally released their standards alignments for high school, so we need to go in and add that. This is developed for K-12, but the elementary levels, they don't necessarily have a clear standards alignment. So, we have not yet done any specific alignment work to it. But similar to what we just said, and relating the standards to the 2.0 standards, you could go in and very easily find topics that relate to skills that you need to teach. And that is kind of one of our goals. It's not necessarily that we think people are going to just cherry pick through all of these different resources all the time. Part of our goal is just to introduce people to new resources. So if you've never used CK12 and then you see, wow, this is a great source, that might be one of your main sources of instruction. We want to expose people to resources that might work for their different setting. And so if that becomes the case, then you can then take that and figure out how you want to incorporate that with your own curriculum. PhET is an awesome simulation site. So these are very openly licensed, as we said. They have teacher guides that talk about how to use these different simulations. You can download these and put them onto your own website. They're available in multiple languages. The example that you see here is looking at equality, and it's looking at it at a basic level, where on the left side of the scale there's 2 lemons, and the student then is just adding fruit on the right side, and they see that 3 oranges and 1 apple equals 2 lemons. And so the student has the ability to then take a snapshot so that they save that. So the teacher could then ask a question, okay, if 3 oranges and 1 apple equal 2 lemons, what would 4 lemons equal? And so suddenly you're getting at equality and some really sort of high-end algebraic concepts using the simulation, and students could add the 2 lemons and then add on the right side to see if they're right. So it's a very simulation-based tool. What's really nice about it is in this concept of equality, you'll see that this Equality Explorer, has multiple different versions of it that get into the same concept of equality, but at increasing levels of difficulty and more complex sort of things, and looking at variables and operations as you get to the higher levels. So really, really like PhET. And again, they have lots of resources for helping you understand how to use it with your students. And it's very conceptual based, right? Where Khan Academy is very procedural, this gets into concepts. So you'll see also that the links on here are directly to the main page where you get the teacher resources, or you could link directly to the resource. Common Core Sheet is an it's an online resource, but it's actually worksheets. So there's over 5,000 downloadable worksheets, but there are interactive activities as well. So you'll see that you can search on this spreadsheet, the alignment document, by topic or by specific standard. So if you go to one of these topics like using units to measure, there might be 5 or 6 different standards within that. Whereas if you go to the standards one, it's just by the standard. So you'll see for every single standard, there's actually 10 worksheets that you can generate or create your own from their library within Common Core Sheets. So there is an interactive practice link for these where you could actually assign that link to students. There are flashcards that are downloadable, so you could print out a set of flashcards. Particularly, these are helpful for things like math facts. And then again, there's 10 worksheets for every single one of these standards that are downloadable. So there's just one of the things when I did work in publishing, as Anne-Marie said at the start, we heard all the time was, we need more practice, we need more practice, we need more practice. Well, here it is, and oh, by the way, it's free. So this is a really good source for just providing that practice. We're going to switch into language now. So Quill is an interactive grammar and language practice site. So what I really like about Quill is it also practices typing. So these are independent activities and there's whole class activities. In this case, you see on the right, this is an activity where it's giving you sort of 4 fragmented type sentences, and the student is asked to create a single sentence, combine all of these sentences into one sentence, and it gives feedback. What I like about Quill a lot is on this, there's multiple different correct answers. So it's smart enough where what I hate is when you have one of those things where if the student doesn't put the period in, or if they didn't put the right space in, or if it's a lowercase instead of a capital, like it says it's wrong even though it's very correct. In this case, it really allows for all of those variations. It's pretty smart. So there's a bunch of different types of activities in Quill. There are lesson-based activities that the teacher can work through with students. So in this case, this teacher has a lesson plan you can project onto a whiteboard. And at the start of the lesson, there's a link that all students can log into. And so then all of the students can be working through the same exercises, and the teacher has the ability to have different students share their sentence. And again, there's multiple different correct answers. So it's a nice way of sort of looking at the different variations and things that students come up with. But a majority of the activities are either sentence writing activities around the concepts or passage proofreading around the concept. So on the left, it's an example where they're given a sentence, that dog is we or ours, and the student has to type in their answer and then check the work. So that's sort of the more sort of common sort of language type practice or grammar practice we do. But then there's a passage proofreading topic where you see that the learner is, in this case, asked to find a series of, I think it's 12 edits within the passage. And in this case, it's one that's a little bit lower level. So they underline, you'll see where they're going to be making the edits. At higher levels, it actually doesn't provide that. And what's really interesting is, so there might be 12 edits that the student is responsible for finding. It's going to give them feedback on everything they do. So even if they type some, say they deleted this comma by Eleanor Roosevelt here, and either if it was correct or incorrect, it's going to give them feedback on that, even though it wasn't one of the 12 edits that they were supposed to make. So it looks at every single thing you did within the passage, even if it's not one of the ones that you were specifically supposed to look for. So what's really great is they can go through these things. It tells them correction by correction what the edit is and what the concept is and whether it was correct or not. And then after doing these sentence writing activities and this passage proofreading, it tells them how many of the things they edited were correct. So super extensive resource for grammar. Common Lit, I know a lot of you are very familiar with. These are leveled texts, and this is the last resource actually we're going to look at. So what I like about Common Lit is you have the ability to filter them by all of these different areas, by genre, by literary device, by text set, or by theme. And when you look at the themes, these aren't just kid themes. They get into heavy-hitting themes that are very adult-oriented, so I really like that. So the way that we've done alignment, it's a little more difficult in reading, is it isn't specifically to the standard, but it's by domains. And so you will see that this divided into informational text and literary text, and what these are filters. So what we've done is if you click on any of these, it's going to preset a filter that is under this domain of key idea and details at this level, which is basically first, second, third grade level, grade level equivalency. and pre-Lexiled. And you'll see on the right that it's indicating the number of readings that are at that level for that subject and that cover these particular standards. So it's just a predetermined filter, and then it's sort of up to you to do that. And yes, there is a Tech and Tell on Common Lit. I know that that does exist. What's really great about Common Lit is all of these texts are both downloadable. So if you don't have internet access, you still have access to these texts, but the online version is super robust. There's lots of different tools in there. And I also like that they have things like paired text for most passages. And another great feature about Common Lit is they have these little video icons in a number of different areas. So it provides an explanation to you as an educator about how to use this type of resource, such as paired texts, with your students. So we're going to make this the last activity. If you want to go to skill blocks on the Crowded Learning site and indicate to me how many texts within the Common Lit library are aligned to the key idea and details domain at level M. I'm going to give you a little hint. So how we get to that alignment, again, we'd go to skill blocks on the Crowded Learning site. And then Common Lit is a reading resource. I'm going to go to the view alignments. And so key idea and details at level M, I'm seeing 2. So there's 129 informational text, and there's 100. So whoever said 229, way to go. I was only thinking people were going to go to this one, but so you'll see it's broken into informational and literary text. So at level M for informational text, there's 129, and at level M for literary text, key idea and details, yeah, there's 100. So there's a significant amount of readings, but yeah, there's lots of readings in there. So again, it's not standard specific, but at least it's getting you to the readability level that's appropriate at that level, and then the specific domain. So great job. Yeah, I made that way more challenging than I anticipated. So we were going to get into tools for sharing, but I think there's a plenty to explore right now as it is. And so just that skill box is where these alignments live, and we're looking at different ways to explore how folks are sharing them. So in the coming months, we're going to provide Anne-Marie with updates in terms of where we are, and once we actually have a live site that pulls all of these different databases together. In the meantime, I encourage you to go ahead and explore and look at these resources and see which ones might be interesting for you with your students.
I just want to thank him. He's incredibly busy. He is, you know, just on the cutting edge right now of a lot of innovative things. Please try to follow him on Twitter, LinkedIn. He's everywhere. And thank you so much, Jeff. I just learned something every time.